Heads.
We're now live streaming.
First time.
Frank McNary, where's your video? And Justin.
Oh, sorry, I stepped away for a second.
I'm working on it.
All right.
Let's see.
Had to relocate.
Yeah. Yeah. Much better.
All right, LMC is all set.
Okay, we're gonna wait till 7:30.
It's past 7:30.
7:31.
My computer says it's 7:28.
I have 7:34.
Well, there you have it. I think if we average all those times, it's 7:30, so we will begin. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Larchmont. Today is Monday, June 13th.
15th.
I always get the date wrong. June 15th. Thank you, Malcolm. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to
to
the
the
flag
flag of the United States
of the United States of America and
and
to the republic
For
which it stands, one nation,
nation
Under God,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and
liberty
justice
for all.
got to match to Lorraine's lip.
And it's still difficult to do that.
Oh, it's hard to
on
do that
Zoom.
and sing.
But at least we get an A for effort. And I think that counts. So start tonight with the mayor's announcements. And unfortunately, I'm starting off with an issuance of condolences to the family of Joyce Callahan, Larchmont Village's recreation director, on the passing of her mother, Mary Fraioli. Mary was a longtime employee of Mamaroneck High School. She passed last week on June 6th at the age of 86. And she will be missed not only by her many friends in the Mamaroneck community, but by her 3 children, their spouses, and her 6 grandchildren. I'd like to thank the Village of Mamaroneck for hosting the Tri-Municipal Community Gathering in Harbor Island to show support for racial justice and equality last Wednesday. I also want to thank the Mamaroneck High School students, but specifically Kayla Yan, for organizing a peaceful march from Harbor Island Park to Flint Park on June 5th. The village has received many emails from young community members regarding local police funding and policies. Governor Cuomo has issued several executive orders and signed legislation over the last few days. And at this time, we're waiting for detailed guidance from the Division of Budget in the state, which is supposed to be preparing that guidance and distributing it out to all the municipalities before we begin planning our review and community input process. Alfresco Larchmont. We are in the just about to start the second week of phase 2. Where retail is open with limitations, hair salons and barbershops, offices, and outdoor dining for restaurants. So far, it's going really well. It's nice to see some energy back in the village. It's nice to see familiar faces on the street again. I just want to let everyone know that our businesses, in order to reopen, they all had to sign affidavits that they would comply with all of the rules and regulations regarding face covering, social distancing, and other issues. And so it's important for us to help them in their success. Wearing a mask when you are in the downtown is important. It is required in most circumstances. If you go into any indoor space, you must have a mask on. If you are less than 6 feet from people, you must have a mask on. If you are waiting for a table at an outdoor restaurant, you must have a mask on. The only time that you are permitted to remove your mask is when you are actually seated at a restaurant table for outdoor dining. So please help our businesses. Don't put an extra strain on them right now, and make them put them in the uncomfortable position of having to, talk to their customers about following these rules. Help them and help everybody. We don't want to have spikes. We don't want to see any of what's going on in some of the 13 states which are seeing rises in cases and hospitalizations. So let's remember that we are opening, we are doing it with care. And if we are too lax in our behavior, then really what we just went through would be all for naught. And that would really be a shame, because so many people really suffered to get us to this position. I want to let everyone know that the Chamber of Commerce of Larchmont has planned to have their annual sidewalk sales a week from Thursday, June 25th, 26th, and 27th. They will be putting out some advertisements about that and letting you know what's going on. But again, I want to encourage everyone to come out. This is an opportunity for the retailers who really had a rough time over the last few months to get themselves out in front of everyone, bring in reasonable numbers of people to look at their merchandise and have some sales. So I hope everyone will find an opportunity within those 3 days to go and do some shopping on the sidewalks. Early in-person voting for the June 23rd primary has begun. It opened this past Saturday and it continues until and through Sunday, June 21st. You probably, hopefully, received an absentee ballot or an application for an absentee ballot and have since gotten your absentee ballot and mailed that in. If you did, that's great. If you did not request one, or you requested it and it has not come, you do have the opportunity to go to the Mamaroneck Town Center and do early voting in person all this week through Sunday. You can look at the Village of Larchmont's homepage on the website. We do have the days and hours that early voting is open. Many people have contacted us about playgrounds. Playgrounds have been closed since the beginning of this crisis sometime in March. The governor has determined that playgrounds can be opened by municipalities, and it's each municipality's decision how they go about doing that, when and if. We are waiting for guidelines which the county is preparing for all of us in Westchester to look at and share. We really would prefer to wait until we have those guidelines. We want to be able to open in a manner that's going to be safe and appropriate for the current circumstances. So we should have that information by the end of the week, I hope, and then we can start to figure out how we can potentially open the playgrounds in a safe manner sometime in the following weeks. My final announcement is about the 2020 census. It's still going on. It has been extended quite a bit due to coronavirus. Right now, we are at 67% response rate, which is not bad, but it's also not as good as we want to have. In 2010, our response rate for the Village of Larchmont was 71%. For every person undercounted, it is estimated we lose $2,500 a year in funding. Funds that are distributed on a per capita basis that deal with schools, hospitals, infrastructure money, sales taxes distributed on a per capita basis. It's really important that we have a fair and accurate count of our population so that we can get all the funding that is due to us. So please, the census workers will start knocking on doors beginning August 11th. If you want to avoid having a census worker knock on your door, please go on 2020census.gov and complete the response for your household. Do not have to be a citizen in order to respond to the census, and all information is kept completely confidential. Next, I have some appointments to committees or commissions. This is for the Parks and Trees Committee. I will just give a little entry here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Herman, who is the current liaison to Parks and Trees. But my first and longest liaison assignment as a trustee was as liaison to the Parks and Trees Committee, where I had the pleasure of working for several years with Tony Porter and Ann Mangan, who were the co-chairs of that committee. They are stepping down, and we have some new individuals coming on. And I'll turn it over now to Trustee Herman to further thank Tony and Ann and introduce the new co-chairs for appointment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And yes, these two co-chairs are most esteemed. Both of them have over a decade each in supporting our Parks and Trees Commission committee. They are moving on to do other things, but Tony Porter has agreed to stay on the committee to help transition, probably for the next year, and will be moving on sometime in the summer off of the committee. We, of course, thank them for their service. This will not be the last time you'll hear their name. We're going to plan a proper way to thank them, perhaps in the fall when we're planting our Arbor Day tree. But we are so grateful for their service over the past decade. But we're lucky. We have two new chairs. Both of them are current members of Parks and Trees. And I'm going to read their bios because they are just so impressive, and we're so lucky to have people like this in the community. Karen Hall has been actively involved in the community since moving here in 2012. She currently serves on St. John's Episcopal Church's vestry and has served on the Chatsworth PTA board and co-developed the Chatsworth Elementary School Garden Program, which is entering its 7th year. Quite a contribution. She has a BS in Computer and Information Science and was a trailblazer in digital media sales. And as she says in her bio, before she became full-time CEO of the Hall family, which I think is a great way to put it. Karen is extraordinarily passionate about the environment and trees, her community, and promoting sustainable practices. I've worked with her extensively. I am delighted that she has stepped forward to be a co-chair. Our second co-chair is Laura Treadway, who's been involved in the community since she got here in 2017. She manages the Chatsworth Avenue Elementary School garden. So the garden that Karen started is in good hands, and serves on the boards of Friends of Larchmont Parks and the Chatsworth PTA. Before moving to Larchmont, Laura lived in Brooklyn. She served on the boards of the Prospect Park Alliance and the New York chapter of Lift Communities. And she holds, Lorraine, you're gonna love this, BA in geology. So now we have two degrees in
Two
geology.
female geologists.
Yeah, from Colgate University. She also has an MA in environmental science and MS in journalism from Columbia. And she was a writer and editor at publications, including Discover, Scientific American, and the magazine for the Natural Resources Defense Council, where I worked when I was in law school. So I recommend that they become our new co-chairs. And I move to have Karen Hall and Laura Treadway become co-chairs of the Parks and Trees Committee. And we're delighted to have them.
We absolutely are. And so I seek a second for that motion.
Second.
Thank you.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And thank
Thank
you
you.
to our now former co-chairs and to our new co-chairs, Karen and Laura. Thank you very much. Well, next up on our agenda is the public conversation. Last month at the May 18th board meeting, the Larchmont Environmental Committee presented to us a proposal to ban gas-powered leaf blowers entirely in the village of Larchmont, and then limit the use of electric-powered leaf blowers to shortened periods of time. Tonight, we're just going to continue that discussion. I know some board members had follow-up questions, and I believe also that the co-chair of the Environment Committee, Lisa McDonald, is going to open with a statement, and there are a number of speakers who are going to be talking first, and then we'll have some questions, and then we'll open it up to anyone else who might be attending the meeting to ask questions and get information. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us again this evening. We thought we'd start with just a 5-minute review of our proposal, as some people may not have seen the presentation last month. So first, the proposal suggests a permanent ban on gas-powered leaf blowers as of January 2022. Until then, we propose they be allowed for use in November and December of 2020 and 2021. But gas-powered leaf blowers should ultimately be banned because they disrupt daily life, damage the environment, present significant health hazards, particularly to the crews, and this presents an environmental justice issue because crews are in closest proximity to dangerous emissions and loud noise. Secondly, after January 2022, the proposal bans electric leaf blowers except for use in November and December. And just to elaborate on this point, we didn't start out planning to ask for a limit on electric blowers. Like many people, we assumed they were clean and sustainable. And it was only when we did our background research that we realized that electric blowers present similar health hazards and environmental damage, and that they are not a good year-round replacement for gas. Electric blowers damage the environment, they damage our soil, destroying wildlife, and ultimately this affects us. You've probably seen the media reports of an insect apocalypse. Insects, pollinators in particular, form the base of our food chain. If we destroy them and their habitats, we ultimately and eventually destroy our food supply. This may sound overstated, but the science community is united in agreeing that this is true. And we must follow the science, even if it's inconvenient, even if it calls for changes in our standards and the way that we prefer to do things. Practically, banning gas and electric was too much change. So we're asking to ban gas, which is the worst offender, and to limit electric to the months that blowers are most often needed. We know already that a ban works for the spring because we've had an emergency ban on both gas and electric for this year, starting April 1st, and it's working smoothly. People are enjoying the fresh air and quiet, and Larchmont looks as beautiful as ever. So we are asking residents to reject the landscape model that's noisy, sanitized, and unsustainable, and to instead embrace a style that is quiet, flourishing, and supports life. We think this will appeal to people concerned for the health of their families and our community. So the third section of our proposal requires landscape companies to register for an annual village permit. We'd like to know who the landscapers are in order to include them in programs and workshops. We'd like to reach out with educational materials regarding new practices in lawn care. Hopefully, we can broaden the business model to include things like mulch mowing, planting, managing vegetable gardens, and even setting up and managing composting bins. Fourth, we'd like the ticketing to be for both property owners and landscape companies. We feel property owners should be ticketed because ultimately they are the decision makers. There's precedent for ticketing property owners for what happens on their own properties, such as we get tickets if we or our service providers don't clear snow from the sidewalks, or if we put garden waste out on the wrong days. Fifth, we'd like the proposal to call for an increase in fines for violations to be in line with those set by the town of Mamaroneck. And lastly, state in code and village subcontractor contracts that there are no exemptions. And this ensures that the village property management becomes a model for the rest of our community. So that's a summary of our proposal. And I'd like to ask Bonnie to present our letter of support.
Hi, everyone. How are you? So can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So a little more than a week ago, we mailed out a letter of support to just people we know in the community. We got over 130 people to sign the letter of support. All of them live in the village of Larchmont except 14 people, and a lot of those live in the town of Mamaroneck. So we think that that's a really impressive number, considering this didn't even go in an email blast. We didn't put this on social media, and just considering there's so many other important issues going on right now and competing petitions, that many people took the extra time to show their support. And so a lot of people put some comments that we'd be happy to submit this list to you after this meeting, and that is our plan. And if you have any questions about that, you can let me know.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks.
I believe Phyllis Jacobs is next on the list that I was given. So Phyllis, take it away.
Hi, Lorraine. Hi, I'm Phyllis Jacobs. I am a 33-year Larchmont resident, and I have been a real estate broker here for 29 years. Last week, Lisa McDonald asked me if I would briefly speak about how I feel about what brings buyers to Larchmont and what separates us from other areas. One of the first things that happened when I bring a client into my car for a tour, or at least did before COVID-19, they always comment on the wonderful and gorgeous mature plantings that we have around town. There are not a lot of communities that look like Larchmont. They come to Larchmont for the green space and for the beauty of our gardens and our waterfront. And I think that the idea that we can offer this in perpetuity is very, very important, which is why I am in support of the leaf blower ban. Also, as a longtime Larchmont resident, I can tell you that I've called the police at least 30 times because the leaf blower, the landscapers would start at 6 o'clock in the morning, which has been an issue for me. But mostly, I think that the leaf blower ban is important because I worry about what we will leave for our children and grandchildren when we are no longer here. So I am in support of the ban. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Luke Brussel is next.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I've lived here for over 20 years. and certainly suffered for most of those, the effects of leaf blowers. And I'm proud to be part of a community that's aware enough and committed enough and engaged enough to actually do something about it. And I certainly support eliminating them for many reasons, but I want to speak specifically to what I think is certainly among the most important reasons to, and brings a certain urgency to the need to ban the leaf blowers, which is their damaging effect on the ecosystem. And it's a damaging effect that is not one like so many we hear about, where the ecosystem will face great destruction from this at some time in the future. Our grandchildren or our children will have to face that. It is imminent, and it's something that we have to face, and we don't have very much time to face it. There was a study published in the just this past 2 weeks that found that you may know, we're now in what they call the 6th mass extinction, and that in fact the mass extinction has been moving much faster than scientists realized, and that unless within 10 to 15 years from now, unless we reverse the extinction, it will be unstoppable and will lead to a total collapse of ecosystems worldwide. First, we would experience famines and mass refugee crisis and collapses of government. But unless and then move on to ultimately, it would render the earth uninhabitable by humans. So unless, according to scientific study, unless we reverse this trend within 10 to 15 years, there is no reversing the trend. So it's very important for us to take every step we can to do that. And frankly, it's the enormity of the threat and of the crisis is so great, and so great in comparison to the way most people, at least to my understanding, are thinking about it right now, thinking about how we relate to the ecosystem, that it's the urgency to take action is even greater. But it's so big that a lot of people can't even think about it, can't face it. But as policymakers, even on a local level, or for this matter, especially on a local level, it's incumbent upon you to look at it rationally, look at the science behind it, and when you see what a threat it is, to take steps. Now, leaf blowers are a direct threat primarily to insects and small animals. We already knew before this latest study that there has been a mass die-off of insects worldwide. So I believe it's 40% of all insects worldwide by biomass have died off, and 85% of all insect species are undergoing a drastic decline in their numbers. Without insects, we could not have plants, we could not have our crops, and we could not have the plants that clean our water, so we wouldn't have clean water, or the plants that create oxygen, and we wouldn't have oxygen. There's a direct relationship to life on Earth and enough insects to support that life. And we're nearing the point where there aren't enough. To make it sort of really clear, when I heard this, it really clicked for me that when I was a kid and we'd go for a drive in the summertime, the car window, the windshield would be covered in insects by the time we got to where we were going. Now, take a look. No insects. Maybe there's one or two. The mass die-off is for real, and it's happening right here. And what happens with leaf blowers is, as interesting, Germany just found, based on scientific studies, that leaf blowers were so damaging that they've now banned them throughout Germany to insects. And what they do, the propulsion of air from the leaf blowers is fatal to insects. And even, for example, here in North America, we have 100 species, or a little bit more than 100 species of native bees. Many of them survive by burrowing into the ground, solitary bees that burrow into the ground in our lawns. When the leaf blowers come, especially in the spring when they're emerging from their winter homes, the air from the leaf blowers kills them off. It also takes away the seed bank of native plants that support the insects, that support the birds feeding their young in the spring, and the rest of the chain of life from that. So compared to the threat we're facing, doing without leaf blowers seems like an easy call, right? Humanity had its entire span of existence up until the 1970s without any leaf blowers, and I'm sure we'll be just fine without them. But if we continue to use them, and remember, in the United States alone, there's 40 million acres of lawns, right? So the effect of the 40 million acres of lawns saving the insects and providing habitat there would make a very significant difference. So it really does matter. So by banning it, we'll take a real step forward for a real crisis that we're facing. And what we're giving up is very, very little in comparison. So I urge you to adopt the ban, adopt it now for Larchmont, and hopefully the other municipalities in the area will follow. But thank you for giving me the time to speak about this. And if anyone has any questions going forward, I'm always pleased to answer questions or speak about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. It's important to bring those kinds of issues to the forefront of the conversation, because I think most people just assume banning leaf blowers is about noise.
Sure.
And to some extent it is, but there's so many other impacts that banning them or the use of them conversely have on both humans and the environment. Next on the list is Elizabeth Poirier.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I have been asked to read these remarks by June Wallach, who is a member of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Healthy Yards Project. Good evening. I have been taking care of my property on my own for many years and have not found the need for a blower at any time. I use a mulch mower to manage my lawn, and I go right over the leaves so they virtually disappear into the grass. No extra effort there, and it is gratifying to know that I am providing a wonderful meal for my yard by doing so. When the leaves get heavy in the fall, I rake them into piles if need be and mulch mow them into small pieces to distribute around my property. By December, there are often collections of leaves that stubbornly gather behind shrubs and in garden beds. I am happy to leave those for the winter. I assure you, as I take care of the yard without help, this is a lot less work than moving them into piles curbside by any method. Overall, I believe it also represents a time saver for landscapers who deploy teams. By spring, I happily go back to that stockpile to use this organic material as mulch. I really do covet fall leaves for their healthy contribution to my property. It seems counterproductive to remove this most valuable asset. Not only does removing leaves result in an unnatural look lacking in beauty, texture, and dimension, but it deprives property of the protection and nourishment it needs for plantings and wildlife to thrive. I can truly see the improved quality of the soil, flowers, and shrubs that result. Sections of my yard that were previously equivalent to dead construction dirt, gray without structure, have become textured, richly colored, full of earthworms, and visited by many birds. Plants are more vibrant and have better color. It is quite the before and after picture. I personally hoard my fall leaves and repurpose this organic material in my yard, as I say, throughout the year. Leaving the leaves is the most normal and lovely approach, far easier on the environment and fellow residents than attacking a precious resource with a blower of any kind. And now I would like to say a brief word about construction and leaf blowers. This is me, Elizabeth, speaking. I have been renovating my Larchmont home for the past months, and my contractor has been careful not to use a leaf blower. He prefers a good old-fashioned shovel and broom, which are very effective, and the very occasional use of an industrial vacuum that is efficient and relatively quiet. I put solar panels on my house during the Larchmont Solarized program, so the vacuum is a great green solution. Recently, the landscaper proposed to clean my gutters using a leaf blower due to the excessive amount of matter that had built up since last year because of the construction. I had missed the fall cleanup. I explained to him that there's an emergency ban in place due to COVID, but that in any case, I always prefer to have it done manually. The landscaper obligingly placed the decomposing leaf material from my gutters into a large garbage pail that I keep for autumn leaves. Through the year, I alternate the collected leaf material with household vegetable and fruit peelings in my garden compost bin. This yields the most delightful sweet compost that I spread on my flower beds every spring during planting. And I have very little to add to June's excellent prior remarks except this. I love to plant flowers and shrubs, and over the years, it has given me great pleasure to hear my neighbors say how much they enjoy my garden. I compost my leaves and I avoid blowing away organic matter, and it doesn't mar one bit the natural beauty of this oasis for plants, birds, beneficial insects, and people. On the contrary, humans are naturally drawn to the delights of a tiny, functioning, local mini ecosystem. Thank you.
Marlene Colbert, former village trustee, is next on the list. You there, Marlene? Marlene? Okay, we'll give Marlene a
Can you hear
moment.
me?
Yes,
Can you hear
yes.
me now? Sorry.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. I just want to say that huh?
Marlene, I think you're on a phone and a computer?
No, I think I'm just on I'll turn off my phone.
Okay.
Is that
There's
better?
a bit of an echo. Go ahead, though.
Okay. On June 10th of this year, I was a 54-year resident of the village of Larchmont. Back in the 1980s, my husband Jerry was one of the people that Glenn Wolfenden recruited to actually start getting signatures against the leaf blowers. That was what, 40 years ago? We have taken village board time. We have taken police time. We have taken the time of everybody in the village trying to accomplish this one effort. As everybody has said much more effectively than I, we are in a crisis situation. My feeling about this situation at this moment in the leaf blowers is if we cannot do this one small step to help our environment, I am not sure what our future will be. So I urge you tonight, after 40 years of working on this, to please take the step and ban leaf blowers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marlene.
Mm-hmm.
Members of the public on the list, we have Ghassan Bejani. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. And I don't see.
Where is he?
I don't see. Okay, so we'll move on. David Reevy. Is David? There he is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, thanks for having me on. As you indicate, I'm David Reevy. I'm a 10-year resident, and my family, 3 children and wife, we live near the Chatsworth Elementary School. And I'm not really like an advocate per se, but I did want to weigh in and give you sort of my opinion. I think I've been just trying to do what's right, sort of do what's right in the environment. For the last 10 years, I've mowed my lawn with a real lawnmower, one of the ones that kind of circle the blades that cut. And just because it's quiet, it doesn't produce any exhaust, it's easy to do. It takes me as long as it used to take me when I had, a power mower, and it's just sort of simple. We compost, we have some solar panels, and it just feels like those are right things to do. And for me, the leaf blower kind of question is in that same kind of category. It's not necessary, right? So just sort of plain and simple. And it's easy to, get around this either by doing some of the things that have been mentioned around using the leaves as compost. You can rake, or something simple along those ways. And originally when I heard about some of this, this sort of effort to organize, I was a little skeptical about it. I work in the city, or I was working in the city before the crisis. I wondered how big of a deal this really was in terms of noise, exhaust, those types of things. As I spent time in the city or traveling, I will tell you over the last couple of months, I get on board meetings with Fortune 25 level companies, and I'll have a little panic attack as I'm running around the house trying to close the windows, because all of a sudden, in the adjacent lawns around me, we'll have like some sort of competition going on to see who can make the most noise, and trying to shut things down. And so the noise is an issue. The smell is clearly an issue. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you what it's doing to my breathing or my kids breathing, but it can't be good. It doesn't smell good. So I just wanted to kind of briefly weigh in and say, as a resident, I think this is important. I would encourage you to pass it. And I will say, as someone who works with companies often around trying to drive change, this is an easy change to make. I mean, the commercialization of technologies, either alternative ones that are more advanced or alternative ones that are less advanced, like my real mower or using a rake. There are easy solutions here. And I would encourage you, we're not putting anyone at any disadvantage by requiring this and making it, from good practice to a law. So thanks for listening to me, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, David. I don't know if there are any other members of the public on this meeting who might wish to say something, participate. If so, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. So I don't see anyone raising their hand. I think finally, Kristen Anderson, the co-chair of Larchmont Environmental Committee, is going to wrap up the LEC's presentation, and then the board can ask our follow-up questions that we may have. Go ahead, Kristen.
Where is she?
Hello.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi.
You have to unmute.
Kristen, you're muted.
Hello.
Yes, good.
Hi. I would just like to offer a historical perspective on the ban. A ban like the one we're proposing. I would just like to bring us back just for a moment to the 1970s when lead paint was banned. Some of you may remember that it was discovered that lead has an effect on the nervous system, and for both adults and children who are around it and around lead paint. And the government decided at that time to ban lead in paint. And there was a bit of an uproar over that. The manufacturers thought it was a terrible idea, that paint would not be as good as it was before. And the painters said that they would have more work to do, that they'd have to use more coats than they did in the past in order to get the same quality. And homeowners were upset that the paint wouldn't look as good as it did in the past. It wouldn't have the same kind of coverage and all. So there was a lot of concern, but the ban went forward because the science was conclusive that lead was a problem for health. And so not too long after a few bumps, the paint industry rallied and came up with paint that could do the job without lead, effectively without lead. And here we are today. Some people don't even remember that lead used to be in paint. And in fact, we now have even higher standards for paint, because now we're talking about VOCs, volatile organic compounds, in paint. And should we look into that to make paint even less of a health hazard? So it's an example of how we all coped. That in the beginning, it can be some time before we get our footing, when there is a transition, when we look to a new paradigm, a new way of doing things. But I think if we have faith in our business community and in our residents, that we can cope with these changes, and we can move ahead into a different way of handling our landscaping. So I just wanted to remind people that there have been other cases where bans have gone through. In the beginning, it's been difficult, but it has worked out in the end. And we can make a change like that here. And I want to add one more thing. People have been talking, being here in Larchmont for a while. We've been here over 25 years. And when we first moved here, in the first few years, my daughters were toddlers. And I remember they used to chase fireflies in our yard just around this time of year, in June. And they would also chase them in Fountain Square. They look like fairies in the lawn, over the lawn. Recently, there have not been very many fireflies. I don't know if you all have noticed, but we just don't get them so much anymore. I'm hoping if a ban goes through, we're going to see those fireflies again, and we'll see toddlers chasing them in the summer evening again. So thanks to the board for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Kristen. I had to unmute myself. Members of the board, and again, if anyone who is an attendee wishes to ask a question, just raise your hand. But members of the board, I know that some of you had some follow-up questions from the initial presentation last month. Now would be the time to pose those questions to the members of the LEC.
Yeah, hi. I had just some questions about battery life. I think Marlene, I sent you something. And I know the gentleman that did the presentation, the professional gardener, he had said that the batteries last between 15 and 20 minutes per each battery, which on an 8-hour shift would give us 32 batteries needed to do a full day's worth of work. What are our thoughts on that, and where are we charging those batteries from? And just curious on what some of the LAC, what are you guys thinking about?
I can speak to that. We did have, we've had discussions with a number of landscapers, not just Dan Delventhal, who, by the way, I'm not quite sure about the information that came across in that presentation, because he has told us that he he uses electric equipment, only electric equipment, and he's been running his business like that for years. And I don't think he could run his business successfully if he had to change batteries every 15 minutes. I just wonder if there was some kind of a misunderstanding in that particular quote. We don't have him here tonight. I can follow up with him, Bubba, and ask him about that, because it doesn't fit with the rest of the picture that he's portraying and other landscapers who are all electric. We also heard at the meeting last month from Dan Mabe of the of AGSA, American Green Zone Alliance. He also maintains that landscaping can be done with all electric equipment, including electric blowers. And he says that that different municipalities have been using electric, switching over to green zones under his oversight and using electric equipment. And we all know municipalities have often very large properties, so they must be able to cope with the battery issue. And we've looked at the testimony from other towns, like in Washington, D.C., they had several landscapers who said that they are able to use electric equipment, that that electric power, electric machinery power, and electric batteries are not really an issue. It's a whole different way of operating, but it's not a barrier to adoption.
Kristen, my remembrance of that conversation with Dan was that he was referring to his, what he called his smaller tools. They had very short battery life, but I would really like to ask him if he could just reply to that and clarify in an email so that could be distributed to the board.
Okay.
We want to be sure of what it is that we heard.
I'll follow up with him and let you all know. I'll pass it on.
Thank you.
And just one of the,
Go ahead. Go ahead, whoever was speaking.
and I just want to say one of the other things about the electric versus the gas power is that although it may be an initial investment in the gas to get started, it pays for itself within a year, right? It will cost less to operate the electric than it does to operate and maintain the gas. So that, I mean, that's also something to think about, Bubba, that it isn't necessarily just about the batteries. It's, there are all the other clearly important issues. However, from the landscaper point of view, they'll end up saving money once they make that switch over.
I mean, I have no issues with electric. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing on the street. So one other comment that I got from someone was that it's extremely difficult to move wet leaves with an electric blower.
Don't move them when they're wet.
Well, unfortunately, like I left all my leaves on the property and we didn't touch it till the spring. And it was the whole fall, October, November, December, January, February, March. It was a good amount of, and we raked and we blew and we raked and we blew. And Luke, to your point, someone had said to me, if you don't get rid of the leaves, I'll have an infestation, possibly ticks, mosquitoes, and all of the things that are not friendly if you're going to be hanging out outside. So I started with my wife back in March with COVID to get some exercise, and 65 bags later, we had cleaned the property. So I'm just looking for some feedback on that. As how do we address that when someone says we'll have an infestation of ants, bugs? I mean, not so much bugs, but ticks, mosquito.
I don't think the suggestion is to leave the leaves as they are, but like Elizabeth was saying in the letter that she was reading, that you mulch them on the property and then let them serve as fertilizer. I don't know that you necessarily want to leave them without touching them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you either mulch or you can also collect them and put them in one area for composting. But either way, they're going to be breaking down. That's the idea, that they will be breaking down and returning to compost
Mother Earth.
material.
I'd like to add something. One of our listeners, Michelle Sterling, has made the point that the professional batteries last 1 or 2 hours per charge. And I remember both Dan's telling us that they charge them at the houses of their customers, and it costs about 10 cents or 20 cents to charge the battery fully, so that this works out for everybody. It's very inexpensive, and they haven't had a customer yet who minded if they, plugged into their electrical outlet to charge the batteries. So they're rotating them constantly. So that's helpful. And the other thing I wanted to say about the wet leaves is some people find that depending on their property and how many trees they have, they may have trouble keeping every single leaf on their property, and there's no obligation to do that because they can be composted. But the ones that you leave under the shrubs, those form dense material, and it is some insect habitat, but mostly favorable insects. And the mosquitoes are in standing water. I think we've all been told that a lot of times, and we do not want to have that, although you could have a stream on your property, because if it's, I have a little bird drip right behind me right now, and as long as it's moving, it will not encourage mosquito growth. But I think that material, what doesn't decompose in one season, I mix together with the vegetable scraps to make the compost, because you need your browns to mix together with the colorful vegetables in order to make compost. So a lot of this material can be used right on the property. And then you can give some to the village in the form of leaves that will be picked up that you've raked to the curb.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
I want to, for those who are watching this meeting on LMC TV, I also want to share a comment that Elizabeth typed into the chat, which plays off of Luke's point about insects, and that one of the important purposes of insects is to feed the babies of birds. And without the insects, you can't have birds thriving and growing. And so it just sort of cycles down from there. Having spent some of my COVID time reading Doug Tallamy's book, I got to become much more aware of the interplay between the insects that you can support in your garden and the birds that you'll see in your garden. And I think that's another thing to think about.
Having made that point, go ahead.
Mm-hmm,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, having made that point, I was just wondering today why I was seeing so many different birds that I haven't really seen in the past in my yard. And I'm wondering if it's related to our gas and electric leaf blower ban, that there are just so many more insects and so many more birds are thriving.
Yeah, well, we're definitely, it's back. Yes, it is back. The book is back, Caroline, at the Larchmont Library, because I returned it finally after having it in my living room for 3 months. But I think we're all seeing a lot more bird and even small mammal activity this year than we've ever seen before, whether that's due to the quietness or in lack of leaf blowers, or if it's just because and no vehicles and etc. But also that we're not so busy and we've stopped to smell the roses, so to speak. So
I don't know if there have been any studies, Lorraine, but certainly as a bird lover and birder and bird watcher, I did notice, well, first of all, a lot of us know that there were 3 baby owls being raised and still living in the Larchmont Manor. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've been here since 1996. I never heard about that before. And there are Baltimore Orioles in the Larchmont manner.
That's right.
Amazing.
I saw one the other day. I could
Yes.
not believe it.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I've put some fruit out in my yard because all the Audubon groups are online now. So you can go to a lot more meetings. And they said, if you want orioles, I didn't get an oriole, but today I've had several red-winged blackbirds, which I've never had on my property before. They're usually closer to the sound. And I think that long period of quiet certainly encouraged at least 3 or 4 species in my yard that I've never had before in years. So just wonderful.
One side benefit of what we've just gone through, I suppose.
Well,
Look for the,
yeah,
look for the silver lining. Does anyone have any other questions? So we're going to want confirmation of the battery life of the types of commercial blowers that landscapers and the village would be using, because if we were to enact the ban, the village would have to invest in equipment, and we'd want to make sure we were getting the most efficient and easily used product out there. No further comment or question? So is everybody self-muted or muted by someone else?
No, I think Marlene is raising her hand though.
Yeah. My question is, you want confirmation, but my other question is it possible to vote on this and get the confirmation, because we all seem to agree that it's not a huge, effort, and that we all agree that the guys could use, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. The guys could use your home, you guys could use your home charger. You could plug it in your backyard or in your garage. So I wonder if it's possible, if you might be willing to vote tonight, because we've just dragged this along for such a long time. Thanks.
Thank you, Marlene. We don't actually have a draft legislation to vote on, and we certainly haven't presented any draft legislation for the requisite public hearing. What I think we can do is get a board consensus on moving forward and asking the village attorney to create a draft that we can put up for consideration. If my board members would unmute themselves, we could do that. We could do that. Okay.
I support that approach.
Mayor,
I support that.
on this.
Okay, so Carol, I heard yes. I heard Sarah. Malcolm?
I said yes.
Okay, sorry, but I heard more than one voice at a time. Bubba?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm the final yes. So I think, Jim, we have a draft of a draft version that was put up for our review a few months back. Let's pull that one back up, circulate it to the board, and see what we want to, how we want to edit that before we place it on the agenda.
That's good.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Larchmont Environmental Committee,
Thank you, everyone.
for all your hard work on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
All right. Let me pull up my agenda. Okay, next on the agenda are the reports. So Chief Polway, we're ready for your report.
Thank you. Good evening.
Chief, are you a birder, Chief?
I am not, ma'am.
Okay, just wondering if you wanted to.
Maybe someday when I have more time. We've been a bit busy though.
Fair enough.
But thank you. And I would like to begin my report with speaking about police actions. I join our state and national law enforcement colleagues in denouncing the actions and inactions of the Minneapolis police officers that caused the death of George Floyd. The officer's tactics and the officer's failure to intervene are inexplicable, and they must be held accountable. The actions and inactions of the officers in question are not a reflection on all the hardworking men and women in uniform who serve and protect us every day. In Westchester and here in Larchmont, we are committed to responding and investigating incidents of alleged police misconduct swiftly, transparently, and fairly. We strive to treat everyone with dignity and respect while embracing the principles of community-based policing. We are committed to partnering with our communities to develop strategies to build trust and promote safety for all. We stress that police community communication is critical to effective policing, and we must maintain open lines of communication now more than ever. While we train and expect our officers to practice de-escalation, we need our community partners to encourage the same. We support nonviolent civil disobedience, not criminal actions that result in injuries to people and damage to property. We stand ready to listen to our community members and our leaders in an effort to better serve our constituents. And with that, that segues into two protests that we had recently within the community. And there were two protests that occurred in our area recently that involved the planning and coordination of police operations amongst the three municipalities, specifically the town and village of Mamaroneck and the village of Larchmont Police Departments. The first occurred on Friday, June 5th, and traveled from Harbor Island down Boston Post Road and into Flint Park. Despite adverse weather conditions, the protest attracted more than 1,000 people. The second event, a community gathering, occurred in Harbor Island on Wednesday, June 10th, and was attended by approximately 600 people. Both events had speakers that discussed the ongoing dilemma of racism in our country and actions that can be taken to eradicate it. Each event was peaceful and ended without incident, and I would like to thank all of the participants for their cooperation. I would also like to acknowledge the positive efforts of all the officers from each of the police departments, as well as the troopers from the New York State Police, in ensuring the safety of all involved. On to barriers. If you have recently driven through Larchmont, you surely have noticed barriers that have been placed in our business districts. These barriers are located on Palmer Avenue, West Avenue, Chatsworth Avenue, and Larchmont Avenue. They're being utilized in order to accommodate additional seating for our restaurants, as we are now in phase 2 of our state reopening efforts. I'd like to urge all motorists to please abide by any signage that may be posted and slow down and use caution when passing through these areas. And Mayor, you had brought this up before, social distancing. I just wanted to take a moment to remind everyone that we are still contending with the coronavirus and that physical distancing is important. Crowds amplify the spread of the virus, so please keep a proper distance in any situation when you are in public. Also, amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, all people in New York and in Larchmont are required to wear a mask or a face covering when out in public and in situations where social distancing cannot be maintained. Manor Park. This has been an ongoing issue, especially since the coronavirus has kept a lot of people home. So we have a lot more people going out and using our parks. And we need the cooperation of the public in addressing some issues. So there continue to be numerous complaints of parking and moving violations on the side streets in the Manor, especially around Manor Park. As people travel into the area to recreate and take advantage of the park, I urge everyone to please reduce your speed and abide by all the parking and traffic regulations. On any given day, there are numerous pedestrians, many of them kids, walking through the side streets, and it is imperative that we do all that we can to keep everyone safe. Patrol units and parking enforcement officers are being assigned to the area to address some of the recurring problems, and a summons will be issued if violations are observed. Again, we ask the community support in slowing down, making sure that we're stopping for stop signs, we're parking in spaces that we're allowed to utilize. What we're seeing is because so many cars are parked, people now are going through the side streets and they're they're kind of racing around to find a legal spot to park. So this is causing some issues with safety. We're seeing additional littering taking place, things being thrown out of vehicles. So what we've been doing is reassigning patrol units and again, our parking enforcement officers in an effort to enforce. Sometimes when people fail to correct their behavior, the enforcement or the presence of police officers will encourage them to abide by the rules. So this is an ongoing problem. We foresee it continuing as the weather continues to be nice. So we ask for everybody's cooperation in making things safer in and around the Manor and specifically Manor Park. Leaf blower ban. Well, I guess I don't really have to touch on it, but I will. The use of any type of leaf blower within the confines of the village of Larchmont continues to be strictly prohibited as outlined in the village emergency order dated April 3rd, 2020 and Village Code section 195.5 subsection B. Failure to obey and comply with these mandates is punishable by a court appearance, ticket, and a fine. The police department has been actively educating landscapers about the emergency order and the ordinance, and we will continue, our enforcement efforts will continue, again, hopefully to gain compliance. Dark house forums. As things begin to return to a degree of normalcy, many of our residents will be going away on vacation and traveling. If you plan on being away for more than a couple of days, please stop by the police department and fill out a dark house form. These forms supply our officers with current contact information and advise us if anyone will have access to your residence while you are away. The forms are placed in binders that the officers take out on patrol, and when time is available, visual inspections of the dark houses are performed and documented. This process assists the police department in determining if any criminal mischief has occurred to your residents or if any suspicious conditions exist. I won't comment right now on the executive orders coming down from the governor, as they are very new and we're just beginning to digest them. But obviously we will work together to make sure we are in compliance with all the orders that have come down. But I think it's just a little too soon right now. And finally, see something, say something. I'd like again to remind everyone to stay vigilant in reporting any suspicious activity that may be observed. If you observe something that may be suspicious, please do not keep it to yourself. Call the 24-hour New York State Terrorism Tips Line at 866-SAFE-NYS or call the Larchmont Police Department at 914-834-1000 or simply dial 911. That concludes my report for this evening, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Chief. And I want to also extend my thanks to the department for helping out with both of those events. And the officers were, quite helpful, and I think portrayed to those who were participating, how the Larchmont Police has operated within the village for all these years. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And it's important for them, for everybody to see that we're really in this together, and it's going to take a collaborative effort to make sure that the proper change occurs. So it was our pleasure to make sure that everybody was safe. And again, I thank the participants because they helped organize everything and they made sure that there was a schedule in place, and that helped us to keep everybody safe. So it was a positive thing, certainly overall.
Yes,
And Steve, I just want to say thank you for, there's a lot more patrol out here on Park Avenue, and the boys are out, they're issuing tickets, and a lot of people do crazy parking, and they're being very polite and cordial, and they're doing the right thing. I think they're keeping people moving, which is very nice. Thank you.
Yes, it's again, it's important to make sure that we have a presence down there. Many times that alters behavior in the positive. We want our main goal is to keep everybody safe. And certainly we have we want to make sure that we're portraying a positive presence to the public. So, we've instructed our guys, especially at roll call, that when they're interacting with the public, to make sure that they're taking time to speak to people, to show that their police officers are part of the community, and we're really there to assist them and to make their lives better. So I appreciate the feedback. And for anybody that's listening, if you do see violations down in and around the manor, just seems to be a big problem right now. Please contact the police and let us know about it so we can address it properly.
And they would do that by calling 834-1000.
Yes, ma'am.
Not 911.
No.
Yeah.
Our non-emergency would be great. So this way it doesn't tie up 911 if we have a true emergency.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
Thank you.
Next up is Chief Caparelli.
Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing?
Good.
I have a brief report for this evening. The Fire Department's Career Chiefs Academy is confirmed for August 31st, 2020 for firefighter John Pillar, our newest employee. Lieutenant Adams of the career staff and firefighter Valentine will be assisting in the instruction of the firefighters in the Firefighter 1 series of the curriculum. And that was part of the training that they attended in previous years to get them to the instructor level. So it's paying off at this point, which is really good for us. I think this is the first time that our department was able to participate in the Career Fire Academy as an instructor, running the classes. So it's very good for us. Marine 34, the fire department's watercraft, is in the water and fully functional. There is now a 200 gallon per minute pump with a deck gun and a handheld hose line, medical equipment, and it is available for mutual aid to other departments. New Rochelle is aware of it, as well as the town and the village of Mamaroneck. Annual hose testing has begun this month. So keep an eye out in front of the firehouse. You'll see the firefighters out there testing the hose down the sidewalk or in front of the firehouse down the apron. And it's something for the kids to take a look at during this time when everybody's looking for something to do. Last month in May, being with the COVID and the quarantine, we did an awful lot of birthday drive-bys. If anybody had seen us do that, graduation drive-bys, the volunteer and the career staff both participated in the Mamaroneck High School senior graduation up at the school, their caravan of cars, which is really nice. Everybody appreciated it. I'd like to just say to everyone that now that the weather is getting better, please use caution when grilling or having an outdoor fire pit. I've been seeing a lot of those lately. Always use them outdoors, obviously. Check for proper operation of your gas grills. Clean and maintain your gas grills. Dispose of any used coals or ash in a metal container at least 10 feet away from combustibles. And in the event of a grill fire, close the lid and call 911. Switching to my role as code enforcement officer. As you mentioned, the outdoor dining has begun this past weekend, and I think it was a huge success. I think everybody enjoyed it. I'd just like to advise the business owners, the restaurant owners, to maintain their 6 feet distance between the tables, maintain a 5-foot pedestrian walkway on the sidewalk to allow passerbys. Follow the CDC and the New York State reopening guidelines for restaurants, including wearing masks for your employees and sanitizing seating areas and the public touch areas. Let's see, a lot of walking around has been happening with this COVID going on right now. So I've been getting a lot of complaints about hedges and trees and overhanging branches on the sidewalks, interfering with people walking on the sidewalks. So the full width of the sidewalk needs to be maintained. No low hanging branches over the sidewalk. So I've been passing by and handing out some notifications to residents and getting some phone calls back that didn't even know what it was, what it was all about. But I've been trying to explain. Some aren't even aware that their shrubbery has grown to the point where it's interfering with people walking through the sidewalks. But I'll be, making my rounds and passing out notifications to that effect. I also have some cloth masks left for pickup if needed by the vulnerable population or anybody for that matter. And I believe, Mayor, we're getting some more this week. Is that true?
Yeah, we're getting more on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And what I want to suggest is that we could potentially pass some number of bags out at our retailers and restaurants for them to provide to customers who show up sans mask.
Sure, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Chief, just a quick one on the volunteers. I understand they're coming back this week?
Yeah. Well, I believe that Village Administrator Dottino is allowing the village employees back on the 15th, which is yet today, right?
23rd, John. I believe
It's the
that
23rd now.
23rd.
All right, so
23rd is not a new day?
we're going to change it then to the 23rd. I was waiting for the village hall to open to the public and to the village employees on the second floor before we allow people to congregate again in the building. So it's going to be the 23rd then. I was waiting. I was going by the village administrator's timeline.
Right, well, John, we'll have to coordinate this week because there's going to be a series of requirements that we have to do both on the public side and even for our own people to make sure we meet the guidelines. So
yes,
we'll coordinate and we'll get a memo out to everyone so everyone knows what to expect.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you.
Jim Stout, do you have anything to report this evening?
I'll speak to the certiorari's later on when you do your resolutions, but other than that, I have nothing for the public meeting, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And Treasurer Gutwine?
Nothing to report this evening, Mayor.
Okay, and then we'll start with Trustee Finelli for trustee reports.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine's brief. I just want to say that unfortunately, the Recreation Department has decided to cancel the summer camp at Flint Park. The Recreation Committee is looking into some additional ways of potentially having some different outside vendors down there and creating some sort of camp, quote unquote. There'll be more information at the follow, and that'll look on the www.villageoflarchmont.org website. The tennis courts are open. There's 6 tennis courts in Flint Park. You're allowed to play singles. I believe we're allowing 3 courts open. Is that still the case? So every other one?
I believe we opened all 6.
All 6, even better. So now we can hold, 12 people down there at a time. Singles only. Come on down, get loose, shake off some of that corona. From what I understand, we are planning on holding one movie potentially in Constitution Park or possibly at the library. That date tentatively is set for July 25th. That's with the Orca organization. And we're working on seeing what type of film it's going to be. It will most likely start about 8:15 p.m. And once again, if you are interested in joining the volunteer Larchmont Fire Department, we are looking for volunteers. I want to thank the 4 people that stepped up during this coronavirus time to volunteer their services to the community. Thank you for that. You will get vetted and, we'll move your application along now that we're back in business. But anyone else that wants to join, please feel free to contact myself, Bubba Finelli, 914-403-2387. Love to chat with you about it and just get you excited about becoming a volunteer. And I also just want to say to the kids of Mamaroneck High School senior class, congratulations. The Chiefs did a great job putting this parade together. It was a big success. And, your doors just opened. Have a great ride. It's not a race, it's a journey. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Froman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start off by reminding residents that the Planning Board and the Architecture Review Board continue to hold monthly virtual meetings. So for example, tomorrow evening at 7:30, the Planning Board will be having their meeting, and then next Wednesday, June 23rd, the Architecture Review Board will be holding a meeting at 8 p.m., all virtually, of course. I also like to report that the Historic Preservation Task Force, while things have slowed down as a result of the pandemic, we are still keeping an eye on the Historic Preservation Survey that we commissioned several months ago. Of course, the health conditions have limited the ability of the surveyors to conduct their surveys, but we're hoping, depending on conditions, to be able to report on the results of the survey in the coming months. And if I may, I'd like to switch hats for a moment and talk to the community as the president of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Hunger Task Force. Since the pandemic began, the need for food assistance in our communities, and I'm talking about both Larchmont and particularly Mamaroneck, have quadrupled. Where the food pantry operated every other week, we are now conducting drive-through and walk-through distributions at the Mamaroneck Avenue School parking lot every week. And we're, in effect, the amount of food that we're distributing to the community has quadrupled. For example, this past last Tuesday, and as we're going to be doing tomorrow, we'll be distributing well over 700 bags of food to any residents who come and pick up food. And the good news is, and if we can look at this as good news, is that first of all, the Hunger Task Force has a waiting list of local residents who have asked to volunteer. We just tell people, we'll put you on the list. Right now, we have plenty of volunteers, but the desire to help out has been extraordinary. And as I mentioned, the need for food assistance has quadrupled, and therefore the cost of all this food has also now 4 times as much as we had spent in the past. But once again, the good news is the extraordinary generosity of our community. Many, many Larchmont residents have really come forward and sent us very, very generous donations. And in fact, I get emails and calls on a regular basis asking me, well, do you need more funds? Can we continue to help? And it's been incredibly heartening, particularly in these times when we're all feeling the pressure of the effects of the pandemic, to see how a community can come together to help those who really are in need. So we should all feel very, very good about our neighbors and the entire community that we live in.
Very true, Malcolm. Very true. Thank you. And thank you for all the work you do with the Hunger Task Force. Trustee Bauer.
All I have tonight is that the library is finally able to get books that people have put holds on and are now doing curbside delivery. So if you have placed a book on hold, it is hopefully coming to the library, and please check your account because you can now go pick that up.
Yay. And they come to the tents that are outside the library on the lawn?
Yes, yes.
Great. Thank you. Trustee Herman.
Very quick note, just to say we are continuing to look for more volunteers for Parks and Trees Committee. There's a lot to be done. As you heard, we have 2 new co-chairs. So anyone out there interested in joining the committee, please email me. And one thing, Mayor, we might want to just briefly talk about our plans for opening Constitution Park. I get a lot of questions about what are we aiming for? July, when's the gazebo coming in? We might want to say a word about where we are.
Yes. Well, the lawn's been mowed.
It looks fabulous.
And it does look great. So one reason we were waiting was to allow the sod to take root. Now that it's been mowed, it's probably okay to be walked on. We have 2 other outstanding excuse me, issues. One is the play area is still under construction. It looks fabulous so far, but until that's complete, I wouldn't want to let anyone into the park. And the final is the gazebo, as you well mentioned. The fact that the gazebo is not up on its platform means that we have a platform that has no restraints on the sides of it. So we may have to wait for the gazebo to be installed before we can open the park to public use. And I don't know if Mr. Dottino has an update on the date yet from the actual fabricator. I know that the installer, the representative who will install, came to check out the platform and situation, but it's up to the fabricator to set the date.
Right. Sorry for the echo. The fabricator looks like towards the end of July, but I pressed upon him our need to open the public space, and if they could expedite it would be appreciated. And they'll continue to keep me in the loop to see how they can shorten that window. But On the furthest end, it would be the end of July. We're hoping for a few weeks sooner.
Great. Sorry to put you both on the spot, but because the park looks so terrific, there have just been so many questions about what's next.
I know, it's very tempting, and I've because I have occasionally walked into the back of the park and sat up by the birches on a rock, and it's just a really fabulous place. I can't wait for it to be open and to see people using it and enjoying it. It's going to be really nice.
Great. That's
So
it. For me, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the administrator report, and I assume that you will save that for the items on the resolution agenda?
Yes.
Unless you, yeah, okay.
Well, yeah.
So we'll move to item number 10 on the agenda, which are the resolutions which are on for this evening. The first two resolutions refer to village elections. You know, I think that even before I joined the village board, and certainly the whole time I was a trustee, this is a topic that has been a conversation and under consideration. And I think that there are some very compelling reasons for making this change. We have a pair of resolutions that would first turn the village election operations over to the county board of elections. It is currently handled by the village staff. And the second resolution would change the date of the village election to be the same as the general election in November. And New York state law allows for the process to be completed by resolution of the board. I would go into my particular reasons for why I think this is an important thing, but first I'm going to ask my trustees to, if they would like to, and anyone else who is listening to share their ideas as to why it makes sense for us to make these two changes.
Well, certainly anything that reduces the burden on our thin staff is something I support. So if we can get support from the county to handle our elections, I think that is just very wise. All of our staff is busy, and anything we can do to reduce their burden is worthwhile.
And speaking from experience, as a new trustee, the first thing you're asked to do when you get on the board in April is to vote on a budget that you haven't necessarily have that much knowledge of, haven't really been involved in the whole process. And so it would be much better if we have the elections in November, you get on the board in January, and then from day one, you can be part of that process, which really begins with the trustees in January, and understand when you get elected, or, if you get elected at that point, you understand the process, you understand what you're voting for, you know what's in that budget.
Right. I would say that for those out there who aren't intimately knowledgeable about the timeline of municipal actions in villages, currently the election is mid-March, and the swearing in is the first week of April, and the village has to approve its final budget by the end of April. And that basically that budget, which will have been created by your predecessor, then sets the agenda for the following year. Your intentions for what you're going to be spending money on are set at that point, because the village fiscal year starts on June 1st, not January 1st, like the town and county.
So there is no caucus if we do it in November. And if we have the election in November, we need to get 100 signatures if you want to become a trustee. Is that
you would have to carry petitions would have to be carried in order to be placed on the ballot. Yeah, just like we do for our town representatives and all of our other elected officials.
Which right there is great, because you get out and get to meet the residents.
Yeah, it's another opportunity to go out and meet people and make your case. There's also been a lot of pushback in recent years as to the exclusivity of the caucus process. I have one other, reason why I think this is really important, and that is voter turnout and participation in the process, and knowledge that, there even is a village election and that there are elected officials who run the village. Voter turnout, even in the most excitable years, is still a very small percentage of the total electorate. I think having the elections at the time of the general election means that every year village residents will see their village representatives listed on a ballot, and will come to understand that not only is there an opportunity for them to vote and participate in the choosing of officials, but potentially themselves participate in the process and maybe become part of the local elected officials. So I really, those are really the three reasons summed up right there. Participation, increased participation, both interaction wise with the community, but in terms of the voter turnout, the relationship between the timing of elections and the timing of the budget, and the time savings and cost savings associated with turning village elections over to the county board of elections. So we have two resolutions, and we have two hands raised. So Rob, would you please unmute Dana Post and Michael Gottfried, who have raised hands to speak. And now we have Stephen Flink also raised a hand.
Oh, this is Dana. Do you hear me?
Dana, yep, we hear you, Dana.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you all said and express my support for this resolution. I've canvassed for many local candidates and was consistently confronted with voters who had no idea that the March election was taking place because they're held in some random day in March and not with the general election when most important elections are held. So I think this will definitely increase voter turnout, and I agree with the cost savings. And if you look through Westchester County, many villages have changed their election date, including Mamaroneck, Croton-on-the-Hudson, Dobbs Ferry, Mount Kisco, Mount Pleasant. I could list more, but really it just makes a lot of sense. So I just wanted to echo my support for this resolution.
Thank you. Stephen Flink?
Hi, it's actually Darren Moss.
Hi, Darren Moss. Why are you impersonating Stephen Flink?
I'm logged in as a coworker, I guess. Didn't realize it.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering who Stephen was.
Wondering why someone from Austin, Texas is on your call.
Right.
I wanted to, again, reiterate what Dana said. As co-treasurer of the Larchmont Democrats, we are, one of our responsibilities is filing campaign disclosure paperwork, and it's definitely a burden that has to be filed with the village as opposed to the county. I don't think we would have to file this anymore if the county takes over, and so it's cost savings and time savings for the village, which I think is really important in today's world, if we can have someone else taking over that responsibility. In addition to voter turnout and all the other reasons that you gave, I think we could support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. I believe Michael Gottfried had raised his hand to speak.
Yes, Mayor. Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, I want to thank you and the board, as always, for the opportunity to be heard. It's an important part of our democracy, as you know, and so I do not take that for granted. I also don't take the franchise for granted. I'm grateful to hear the reasons that were proffered this evening by Trustee Bauer, because I had not heard that one. And that one actually has the best resonance with me as a former member of the Finance Committee, because it is an important component. But what we're talking about right now, Mayor, is an issue of franchise. And with due respect, I was troubled and tremendously surprised when I took my regular walk through the manor and went in front of the village hall, looked on the board and saw on the agenda on Saturday that you were planning on changing the rules by which we have been governed since our inception. Rules that are set forth in Article 15 of the Village Code. Rules that I'm not saying can't be changed, but I looked at the resolutions, and the issue that was set forth in the draft order or resolution is the increase in voter turnout that may happen. That is true. It may happen, and that may be a good thing because what you're doing is you're tying our election to federal issues and state issues. So if you're trying to get participation of residents, the question is do you want them to be focused on local issues or national issues when they're voting, right? So we've had elections way back when, Jim can probably confirm, that were, Judy O'Gorman comes to mind, which were decided by one vote. We've had elections decided by 2 votes. It's not such a terrible thing. Those were contested elections where you had a lot of votes. So I'm not particularly moved or persuaded that just changing to November for increased turnout is a sufficient reason. But we do live in a democracy, and the rules of our voting really, to my mind, need to be set by the residents. I did take a look at the law. It is correct that under Section 15-104, subsection C, that you have the right to change the franchise by resolution. But I was struck by the words of the statute, which provide that it's subject to a permissive referendum immediately after that. And I was trying to think about why it is that that the legislators who established this law, set it up under village law many years ago, would put it there right after the words. They could have put those words anywhere in the statute, but they chose to do it immediately after saying there was by resolution. And that to me speaks volumes, that we need to take notice of the fact that Article 9 is referenced immediately after your right to have a resolution of this kind, because it is so important to remember that what you're doing here is you're changing your own terms of office, and you're changing the power balance in a village, right? Like I said, we've had elections decided by 1 or 2 votes. So anything you really do right here is going to have an impact. You could have just as easily said that you're increasing the rights of the participation of residents, but by the same token, you are deprioritizing local issues. Or you could also have said that you are making it harder for individuals in the village to pursue a campaign for office. Because if you're in the minority party, you're going to be running into, for example, who's going to vote this November for someone who's aligned with President Trump, right? That's a question to be asked. So this will have an impact. I'm not suggesting that it's not a good impact. What I'm suggesting is that you are changing the franchise here, and I strongly encourage you to read Article 9. Article 9 says that within 10 days after your resolution, it has to be published. And then anyone has the right to go and ask for 20% of the electors to put it on the ballot. That's in section 9-902. Section 9-908, which is also an important part, says that the Board of Trustees may, upon its own motion, cause to be submitted for the approval of qualified electors, enact a resolution of the board, such as this, with a petition that could be filed as provided in this article. So there is a remedy in here for you to put this to the residents. And I urge you, since we're having an election in September, for you to consider that strongly and imagine, well, not imagine, but to see how much more credibility this act is going to have in the future when people are looking back, if it is said that we changed the rules to take us out of the village default election process and went to the non-village default election process, the town and the cities, by vote of all of our residents who come out in September. And I would say in this particular case, it is even more appropriate for you to put it on the election, because the resolution that you're talking about here, it will be extending your own term, Mayor. And it'll be extending the term of Trustee Bauer, and it'll be extending the term of Trustee Finelli. So it will be so much more, the process would be a little neater, I would say, is if this resolution references that the governor's order extended your terms through September, but it didn't extend the term at the backside of what's happening. And so you're effectively running for, you're going to be elected for 26 months. Similarly, Trustee Frauman and Trustee Herman, they were elected last year to 2-year terms. We, the people, voted for 2-year terms. If we would have been asked to vote for 28-month terms, there's no doubt in my mind we would have done so. But still, it is the right of the residents to elect their officials. And I think that since we have a vehicle for you to do that, just by adding a provision under 9-908 and putting it on the ballot in September, it will clean this thing up, and it'll be there'll be no way for anyone to question the the question. And I just want to sort of finish here by remembering what we had in December. There was a board meeting in December where there was an issue of a conflict that arose. And, it was a fiduciary's obligation that we were talking about. And there was the disclosure of the conflict at a work session. And I remember Trustee Herman's response. And it was a memorable, it was appropriate, and it was 100% on point. When she heard of the trustees' decision not to disclose and to seek approval at the time of the conflict, she said, I wish I would have known, because I would have approved it. We would have approved it. That to me is the essence of ethics. That to me is the right way to do things. When you have an inherent conflict of interest, it is incumbent upon you to seek out those above you who are going to be able to approve the act. And in this particular case, you have an opportunity to do so by putting it on the election, allowing the voters to extend the terms and giving full disclosure of this, and just say yay or nay. With that, I would just also like to point out that I think in the resolutions that there is a reference to the village administrator being empowered to take all the ministerial acts in both of these. Frankly, I do believe that you have your trustee Stout could probably confirm better than I can, but I think that that's the responsibility of the village clerk under the law, as well as under the contracts that are here. It's a distinction without a difference because they are one and the same, but for purposes of future elections, because this resolution will govern future elections in November, I think you may want to make that change. Lastly, the question about the County Board of Elections conducting village elections. Listen, I understand saving money is a good thing. Trust me, everyone knows I am all for saving money. But what you're talking about here is $1,500 a year. We've had one contested election in so many years. The clerk's salary is not going to be shaved because he doesn't have to handle these elections, right? So you're not really talking. You're talking about the outside parties. It's not a lot of money when you stack it up against what you're talking about at the issues. And for the gentleman who said that he didn't think that we're going to have to file financial disclosure forms with the county, I respectfully suggest that someone take a look at that, because that's another big issue. Each and every one of you, when you run for office, has to file a financial disclosure form. You have to file affidavits. You have to say that you're going to comply with the rules. You have to do all of the things in terms of fundraising reports. You have to do all that stuff. There's a treasurer that needs to do that. All of that stuff is going to move from our nice little filing cabinet at Village Hall onto the internet, right? And it's going to, any questions you have with respect to particular laws and stuff like that are going to move from Village Hall to Quaropa Street in White Plains. And as Councilor Stout can tell you, we've had some people who have filed complaints in our elections many, many, many years ago. Okay, those were dealt with quietly and privately, and we are giving that up. I'm not suggesting that that's a bad thing. I'm suggesting that is a cost of doing business when you move your elections to the county. There's a reason why this this resolution hasn't been done in 20 years. This is not the first time it's been raised, right? But the people that looked at it before had a different balance. They thought that maintaining control over our private elections was an important part of being a village. We, the people of the village of Larchmont, hold the franchise. We should be entitled to have a voice. It should not be by board resolution of 5 wonderfully terrific, fabulous trustees. You guys are the best. It should be put to a vote so that history shows that the village of Larchmont residents chose to move to November. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you. Any
comments? Yeah, I'll say something.
Yeah.
Michael, I appreciate everything you have to say. But if you look at the elections that have taken place in March, I mean, sometimes we get 50, 60, 80 people. So the board's attitude was maybe we can create some excitement, get more people involved in local politics, move it to a date where everyone's going to come vote, and really kind of put the forefront of what's going on in the village of Larchmont out there for people to see, to understand, not so much at a national level, just to the fact that it's all part of the exciting genre that's taking place at that time. So to think that, residents need to vote on this, when you get 75 people to come to an election, a lot of people don't really care as long as their garbage is picked up, their leaves are picked up, and the snow is removed. A lot of people think it's a paid position. It's not, it's a volunteer position. So there's a lot of things people don't know about it. So I think the board thought that if we could make it into a bigger moment, we would get more people interested in what's taking place with the village government and create more of a buzz.
Yeah, Bubba, to that point, I don't see how the village of Mamaroneck having their elections in November has decreased the focus on local issues there.
Right.
They have contested elections, I think, every year, just about every year. And there's always a lot of discussion and debate over very local issues. I think it does require that those who want to get involved actually follow a process and put themselves out in the community to make their case, which I think is a really beneficial way to approach the democratic process. In terms of the concept of self-dealing, I suppose is what you're referring to it as, by extending our terms, at some point when the election gets changed, there's no other way to do it. You either extend or you decrease. The legislature determined that extension would be the methodology used here. I would just as easily agree to a decrease in term, having just had the election moved by several months as it is. And again, we are not compensated either monetarily or with benefits. So there is no financial gain for us. And we're really just trying to do here what I think has been in the best interests of the village for many years. But again, nobody seemed to want to maybe have this conversation and move forward and have it done. So I'm sure other trustees have things they might want to say.
Well, as Trustee Finelli mentioned, and as others have, the potential for greater participation among the residents, I think, is for me a great attraction for moving the election to be timed when there's a national election. More people will be voting, and it'll be up to the local candidates to still make their case and make the residents aware that while you're coming to vote for a congressman and assemblyman and senators and even president, that, hey, you'll be also voting for your board of trustees, and be informed about that.
I think Michael has a rebuttal.
Oh yeah, we can
Thank you.
Are you muted, Michael? I didn't think you were muted. Go ahead.
I was muted. Sometimes my wife wishes she had that power too. But look, first of all, Mayor, I hear you on the self-deal, and you're 100% right in terms of the that you're uncompensated. And as you'll notice, I did not use the words self-dealing, right? Because I'm a huge fan. I said there is the resolution creates an inherent conflict. And I tried to explain what that conflict was. I respectfully disagree with you that you can't correct this. I think your resolution should have a whereas clause in here that says what the facts are, namely that there's an election coming up and that the resolution is changing what was voted for by the residents at the caucus, those who attended, namely a 2-year period. Now, your 2-year period, the 3 2-year periods that are up in September were extended by operation of state law, right? But the residents still voted, or the residents who attended still voted for a 2-year term, which would extend in March. You can very simply fix this resolution by proactively saying that you are extending the term, and you are by operation of this resolution, and extending the term for the other 2 trustees, and in the best interest of the village. So now the question really becomes whether or not we, the residents, have the right to say yay or nay on this resolution, or do we have to go and get 20% of the electors to have our voices be heard? That's the question. I don't see any downside. I think it's in putting this on for September. The statute clearly provides for it immediately after your rights, your authority to do it by resolution, immediately provides for it. And it's in keeping with protecting the rights of residents and the franchise and their franchise to vote on this. And so there are a tremendous amount of reasons to do this. Okay, but it has been discussed, Mayor, over the last 20 years. I've been part of those discussions. I've heard those discussions. And there are two sides to it. And I frankly think that the side that isn't being protected here, right, has the right, should have the right to be heard on this. And it's not talking about 2 days of notice, which was given from Saturday till tonight, but between now and September. And just put it out there. Let the people who want to come vote on it, and you'll have a process that is beyond reproach. The alternative, and listen, I agree with you. If people want to be involved in village politics, sometimes you got to go out there and and get signatures. It's part of the process. But in this particular case, the doing so would require a second election, right? Or a special election, because when someone gets that 20% of the vote for the electors, first of all, we don't know how many electors there are. We don't know, presumably it has to be done in 30 days. But if you look at the statute, as I have in section 908, if there is a regular election coming up in 2 months, the first day of the 2-month period, then it can be on the election in September. But we are now on June 15th. So anybody who wants to get this on the September election for the residents to vote would have to collect signatures within 30 days of when this thing is adopted. And that the question is would that be tonight, or would that be when it's published? And that's going to put you into July. And if it's on July, it can't be on the September ballot. It would have to have a special election. So I urge you to think about that and seriously consider how much of an imposition it would be to put it on this September's election, so that we don't have to have a special election, and allow the residents to be heard by their vote, including those that didn't get notice of the opportunity to be heard tonight. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. I mean, the agenda is on the village calendar, so anyone who's interested in what's going on in local village government, we would assume checks the calendar and the agenda. Likewise, we were elected by village residents and entrusted with many decisions to be made on behalf of the village. This is one that the law gives to us as well. And I think that we are in a position to be able to make that choice with the understanding, as stated in the resolution, that there is the opportunity for permissive referendum. And if enough people are interested in this issue and feel concerned about it, as you do, then it should not be an effort to collect signatures and submit a petition to create that referendum in a sense, we're saying we're assuming an interest that we haven't yet seen. And so the public can show that interest, a referendum can be held, and people can come out and make that decision via vote. Once again, at the I believe they could still do it at the September 15th election. And for that, I'm going to switch to Jim and Amanda to help with the timeline of this.
Simply stated, yes, I believe they, in my opinion, if the citizens want to bring on a permissive referendum on this, it can be held on the September ballot.
Jim, I would urge you to take a peek at 9-902 subsection 5 and 6 and take a look at the difference between the timelines of that. My reading, it says that July 1st.
I have looked at them, but I'll look at them again.
Okay, my reading is that July 1st is the deadline for September. I could be wrong on that. I defer to you, of course. But if I'd like to know when the date is to get it on under the statute, because if it's July 1st and there's going to be a window from June 25th, 10 days after this, it's adopted, to July 1st, it's not realistic to get, especially since there has to be a certification of the electors. And I'd like to see a copy, obviously, of the electors that would be qualified, and also the number that would be required to put this on the ballot.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
By the way, I'm fine if you want to slash into the resolution where it says village administrator, make it village administrator / clerk. I'm fine with that. I don't think it's necessary, but I see no harm in it.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. McNary, do you have the resolutions that you could share on the screen, or?
Yeah, let me just pull them up.
Thank you.
Sorry. Hold on. Oh, sorry, the Zoom bar keeps getting in the way. I believe this is one of them, or both of them.
Yeah, I think that's both on separate pages. So the first resolution moves the, you have to go back, scroll up to the first one. Thank you. Yeah. The first resolution is providing that the County Board of Elections conduct the Larchmont Village elections. That is in accordance with section 15-1041C of New York State election law, that we could determine to have village elections conducted by Westchester County Board of Elections. And that this resolution would be subject to a permissive referendum as provided in Article 9 of New York State Village Law. And it would be further resolved that the Village Board of Trustees authorize the village administrator / clerk to take such administrative and ministerial action as may be necessary to effectuate the terms of this resolution. So I would seek a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
And the second?
Second.
I think we had 2 firsts and 2 seconds. So
I figured I'd let Bubba have the first, I'd take the second.
Bubba has the first.
Okay.
Sarah has the
Carol
second.
can have it.
Okay. And all those who say, all those who say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We can roll down to the second referendum now. Thank you very much. This resolution, it has to deal with actually changing the village election date from March, the 3rd Tuesday of March, to November on the date of the general election. And it resolves that the election shall be held on the 1st Tuesday after the 1st Monday in November, the same date as the general election, starting in the year 2021. And it is further resolved that this resolution is subject to a permissive referendum as provided in Article 9 of New York State Village Law. And it is further resolved that the Board of Trustees authorizes the village administrator to take such action as may be necessary to effectuate the terms of this resolution, and that also will be amended to village administrator / clerk. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Frank. You can turn off the screen share. Next up on our agenda is 3 tax certiorari settlements. So I'm going to ask Attorney Stout.
So Mayor and Board, you have reports from my firm about each of the 3 certiorari settlements that I'm asking your authorization for me to execute their stipulations. And one is for this 1 Addison Street property, the other is for the 2001 Palmer Avenue property, and finally the 2362-64 Post Road property. As you can see from our confidential memoranda, in each case, the settlements are supported by our assessor. The settlements are, they're backed up by appraisal information, and they are in line with the assessments either previously agreed to or simultaneously being agreed to by the town. So I'm recommending that you approve these by authorizing me to execute the 3 stipulations. And I'm asking for a motion to that effect.
Okay. I seek a motion to approve the, we can do them as a lump sum, I'm sure, the 3 tax certiorari settlements that are before us on the agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Carol, you're muted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Bubba. Sorry.
All those in favor?
There you go.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. Next on the agenda, we have 2 bond issuance resolutions. Frank McNary, can you please pop up the?
Yep.
They're like, I think they're 21 pages. So that's the first one there. Do you have the copy of the other one?
Yeah, the other one is, sorry.
Did you want me to speak on them, Justin?
Well, I'll just give a quick overview. So both of these pertain to debt that we need to be authorized to take out. One of them is for the sanitary sewer repairs, a project that we've been talking about for probably about 5 years. Just a quick summary. As you know, we are in an IMA right now with Westchester County. Part of that IMA, we had to evaluate and fix our sewers. We received a grant, which covered 40% of the project. The bid prices actually came in very well, so we were able to do more work than we initially thought we were able to get done. We're not going to be complete all of the work that was identified as being issues with our sewers, but we were required to do the highest contribution to our I&I inflow infiltration first. That's because we have an overflow facility in Flint Park that's owned and maintained by Westchester County, and New York State DEC is no longer allowing that facility to operate as a direct overflow to Long Island Sound in periods of high flow. So we need to fix our sewer system and tighten it up so that in periods of high rain, we did not have to overflow into the Sound untreated sewage. The $800,000 allows us to complete all of the repairs that were identified by our engineers in coordination with the City of New Rochelle, the Town of Mamaroneck, and the Village of Pelham Manor. The work has been identified. We have a contractor in place, and we're gearing up to do this work this fall. Again, you've seen the trucks around town. There was a ton of work, but we've lined pipe, we've fixed broken pipe, we've rehabilitated manholes and other sewer structures. And this last round of work will involve repairing the sewer network located on Old Colony and Shore Drive. Right now, we've determined that to be the highest risk, not only for an I&I, but collapsing. And if any of you have heard me speak, one of the things I find most troubling is when our sewer backs up into someone's home. And this is a very proactive repair. It's a very necessary repair. So we're going to rehabilitate that network of sewers. And then after this, we'll continue on our annual program to clean pipe, fix pipe, and stay better on top of this utility, which is what it is, than we have in the past. The important thing to know here that the structure of the sanitary sewer fund will provide that the sanitary sewer fee will cover the cost of our debt service. So this debt issuance is of no impact to the tax base, so to speak, in that it will be paid by user fees. The other project, the street sweeper, we've been talking about that for quite a while. And we even talked about that in the budgetary context. Right now, our street sweeper, it's used every day, but it's the most vulnerable piece of equipment we have. It has a lot of moving parts. It's over 10 years old. It's actually close to 20 years old, I think. I think it's a 2007. So it's closer to 15 years old. And it's costing more to operate it and maintain it than it would be to have the debt service for another 10 years. If you can really, that's the rationale at this point, is that we've determined that it's an important service. We need to maintain our streets, not only for cleanliness, but it also contributes to stormwater and the Long Island Sound in terms of collecting that debris before it goes into our waterways. So it's very important. And it's also very important to have a reliable piece of equipment. That $175,000 would be part of our debt service that's serviced in the general fund. But if you remember, we had a drop off of debt. So again, this is keeping with the practice of keeping our debt service level and maintaining our infrastructure. Kimberly, anything to add?
No, we're looking to ban these two items in July.
Very good.
I would just say, in terms of the process, you want to adopt the secret, the way you have them on the agenda is the correct sequence. Do the secret resolution first, and then the two bond resolutions, and they each should be done separately.
Right.
And roll call, I believe, also, Jim, for the bond resolutions.
Yes, I'm going to say yes to that. That some are not doing that anymore, but until bond counsel tells us not to, I would do that.
Very good.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, we discussed it a little bit on our work session, but the village just refinanced a ban rather, and our rate was
0.94.
So yeah, that's great.
Did very well.
Yeah, so this is we thank the treasurer for that, and this is a good time for us to be bonding for these particular projects. We can get them done, and the cost for borrowing is almost zero. Almost. Okay, so the first resolution is to, I don't have it on my agenda anymore. Okay, so the first resolution is for declaring the village as lead agency for purposes of SECRA as it relates to the sanitary sewer project.
And that same resolution also provides that it's a type 2 action, and accordingly is not expected to have an adverse effect on the environment. It's all in the same resolution.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we need
Not on this one.
not for this one, just for the two bonds? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, next, then we'll vote on the resolution to approve the bonding for the reconstruction of the sanitary sewer system project. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and then let's go by Mr. Finelli.
Agreed. So moved.
There's an aye. Ms. Bauer?
Yes.
Ms. Herman?
Aye.
Mr. Fruman?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thank you. And final resolution to approve the bond for reconstruction. Oh, no, sorry, for the purchase of the new street sweeper. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, here we go again. Trustee Finelli,
Aye.
Trustee Bauer,
Aye.
Trustee Herman,
Aye.
Trustee Fruman,
Aye.
and Mayor Walsh, aye. Thank you. Let's hope we get like 0.5%. Always improving.
Try my best.
Improving. Yeah. And the final item on our resolutions list is an IMA with Westchester County for solid waste and recyclables disposal. So I would ask, Mr. McNary, do you have that IMA? Can you pop that up on the screen?
You.
There we go. And we'll turn it over to Mr. DeTino to explain to everybody what this is about.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe the concept of the county solid waste district dates back to the 1970s when the county realized it had to take a regional role in solving the issue of trash disposal and handling the Croton Point dump, at which point they realized they had to close that. So they created a district. They brought in a waste to energy plant. And in order to operate that, they needed to make sure they had enough trash coming in there to meet its needs. So the district was formed, and then these agreements were formed so that the county knew that we were at least in on a 5-year interval, so they had enough lead time to make changes. So the village, obviously, we don't directly bring waste to the transfer sites, but we do through the Larchmont Mamaroneck Joint Sanitation Commission. So whether it was through the commission or through a private contractor or through ourselves, embarking in this IMA will allow us to bring trash there that's municipally collected, and we would pay that rate, which is really good. It's a $29.28 rate per ton, which is also obviously subsidized by the county solid waste district tax levy, and also sales of recyclables. And there's a whole operation of finance that goes into that. But at this point, at this juncture, this is it's basically a rollover agreement. The county wants to know that we're still on board, so to speak. It doesn't lock us into any other particular sanitation collection method, just that our trash gets to go to the county facilities and handled by the district once it gets there. So I certainly would recommend the board consider the IMA and approve it this evening.
So the board and the Village of Larchmont agree to the IMA as opposed to the Sanitation Commission?
Correct. It's municipality by municipality. For example, if we weren't with the commission and we had a Carter, or we had our own sanitation district, it has to do with where and whose municipal waste is collected, not so much who's doing the collecting.
Understood. Thank you.
It's an interesting point because actually an IMA with the Sanitation Commission is on the agenda for the commission for next week.
Yeah.
Well,
Believe
what
it's
the reason why I
same
asked the question,
document.
I'm sorry, Mayor. The reason why I asked the question is that having an individual IMA gives us the maximum flexibility in deciding how we manage our waste. And I am surprised if there would be another IMA with the commission. So I take it that if that's on the agenda, you'll come back and explain to us why there's an IMA on that agenda.
Absolutely. I asked for a copy of the IMA so that I could take a look at it prior to any meeting, and I have not yet received it.
Just one other question, just one other question on that. Is that a new development in that would be different? I thought this was merely a rollover IMA. So we've already had, the village have already had an IMA. Is the Sanitation Commission considering something new?
So the only thing I can jump in on, there's a number of IMAs that the County Solid Waste District has out there. One is for organic material. I believe Scarsdale, I saw one on one of their agendas for food scrap recycling collection. So I don't know exactly what IMA the commission is working on with the county.
Okay,
but
helpful.
there are multiple things that the county does by IMA.
It's exactly the same. I just looked at my email and this came to me today, and it's actually, I have to take a closer look at it now that I have it. It's exactly what we're looking at here. It's for solid waste and recyclables disposal for refuse disposal district number 1. And it's addressed to the town of Mamaroneck.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, yes.
So I just wanted to let you know that I got a phone message from Town Administrator Steve Altieri today, and I think he may have later in the day sent me this document in my role as attorney for the Garbage Commission. And in his phone message, he said he had this document, wanted me to take a look at it, and that it was sent to him with the town's name on it, but that he was going to be contacting them about switching it to the name of the commission. But that's all I know because I haven't spoken to him since he left me that phone message earlier today.
Yeah.
And Jim and Lorraine, would that be a change from the way this was previously done in the past?
I wouldn't know because, and in terms of the commission, because I was not the commissioner 5 years ago.
5 years. Okay.
I can't recall whether we had each had separate agreements. If you made me guess, I'd say I thought we did, but because they were requiring them from each municipality, but I'm not certain. I only got a call about this today when I was preparing for this meeting, and I haven't looked into it any further.
So that's exactly what I was thinking about, Trustee Herman, when I was reading through this, the points that you raised, which one is that it allows us maximum flexibility, but also sort of sets out an understanding of our relationship in terms of our solid waste disposal vis-a-vis the commission, that I found interesting in light of some of the recent conversations we've had. So I'm going to look into this with the help of Jim and Justin to see what we had in place for the period that ended October 21st, 2019.
Thank you. Keep us posted.
Sure. In the meantime, though, I think it's in the interest of the village to execute the IMA directly with the county.
Seems so.
And so I seek a motion to approve this resolution to authorize the execution of the IMA with Westchester County for solid waste and recyclables disposal.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And this authorizes us. It doesn't necessarily compel us. So
I'll hold off on signing any documents until we know exactly where we want to go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you. Okay. And now Actions taken at previously held work sessions, which is how we are going to now phrase that section of our agenda from this day forward, so that it's not confusing to anyone who looks at it. And actions that were taken previously held work sessions on June 1st. The Board of Trustees had received a site plan and special permit application for mixed-use development notice of intent for a mixed-use development. And we issued a notice of intent to serve as the secret lead agency and made a referral of the special permit application to the planning board. That is actually on the planning board's agenda for tomorrow evening's meeting, I believe. And we also authorized the administrator to execute a license agreement with Michael Gapin and Rachel Grisham for planting on village property, which is the planting border between their property and Constitution Park. Justin, has that been executed?
No, not yet.
Has it been drafted?
There's a draft, yep.
Okay. The planting's been done, so we'd better execute the agreement forthwith. That will lay out the terms of maintenance of the material. Number 11, hear those persons who wish to address the board. Do we have any persons left who wish to address the board? Raise your hand if you're muted. We can pull you in. Okay, no one's raising any hands, so I'll move on to number 12, approve the minutes of the meeting of May 18th. I seek a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of the board of May 18th, our last live meeting, by the way.
Yeah. So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, hold on just a second.
Oops.
Trustee Froman, I'm not sure you were at that meeting. March. Oh, no, May. I'm sorry. I'm reading it as March. Never mind. May 18th. We're good. We're all aye. We approved it. Minutes of the work session, May 18 and work session, June 1. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Finale. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we do not have approval of the bills this evening. Those will be moved to our next work
session.
So I seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you to all those who joined on as attendees and participants. And thank you to LMC Media for hosting this Zoom meeting and live streaming us and covering us on cable television. And also they will be providing this meeting on their website and on their YouTube channel. So good evening to everybody.
Have a safe 4th of July.